and welcome to Manufacturing Sustainability 20-Minute Talks. I'm Gemma, your host for this series where I'll be talking with the people leading the conversation in manufacturing sustainability. I'm going to try and get through this introduction today with a sore throat, so the show must go on and please bear with me. Today's guest is Sherri Monroe, Executive Director of the Additive Manufacturer Green Trade Association, the AMGTA, a global non-profit trade group founded to understand and promote the environmental benefits of additive design, manufacture and strategy throughout the global supply chain ecosystem. Sherri brings leadership experience from both the for-profit and non-profit sectors, driving innovation, technology development and innovative reimagining in both legacy organisations and startups. Sherri has been a consultant to top-level organisations as well as serving in leadership at large national and global humanitarian NGOs to drive stakeholder engagement around a common cause. She holds a Masters of Business Administration degree from Rollins College in Florida. The AMGTA is a MANSUS partner, and they bring together organisations throughout the manufacturing ecosystem to identify best uses, better practices, share findings and address challenges. AMGTA says that although 3D printing and AM technologies have been around for over 20 years, this growing set of technologies is clearly in an emerging phase of commercialisation. While the benefits that AM technologies bring to component design and production are well known, the broader business impacts on supply chain, distribution, inventory management, sustainability and operations are just now becoming better understood and applied for bottom line impacts. We get into all of this in the episode, where I begin by asking Sherri to tell us a bit more about her career journey and the work she does as Executive Director at the AMGTA.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I do not have a background in AM or in manufacturing, but I do have a background in technology and sort of that startup space of bringing new technologies to business, making the business case for it. And also have a experience in bringing together a group of stakeholders around a common cause, which is very much what AMGTA is doing. And so this has actually been a great fit for me, I believe. And I'm just having a great time here. So the AMGTA stands for Additive Manufacturer Green Trade Association. So that's a real mouthful. So we just keep it at AMGTA. But what this is it's a trade association, a global trade association focused on the environmental benefits of additive manufacturing. For anyone who's not familiar with additive manufacturing, it's a whole host of a very broad range of technologies, but all centered around 3D printing. So most of us are familiar with some sort of 3D printing. You can print plastics, you can print metals, you can print wood, ceramics, all kinds of things. But it's based on that, but it's a whole lot more than that, way more than that. And the business implications for this are really quite revolutionary. And it's one of these technologies that its very base has been there for a long time, but now it's really in an emerging technology phase where it's really being commercialized on a production level and really starting to see some huge impacts. Our membership is global, as I mentioned, probably about 45% North America, 45% Europe, and then the rest around the world, but growing very quickly. And our membership also comprises everything from the source material manufacturers, the 3D printer manufacturers, the design software, all the way through to the end users of these technologies. And I kind of divide it and the sector into two groups, right? There's the technology developers, there's the technology users. And we really feel like it's important to have all of those people as part of the conversation, because if you're just coming up with a cool technology and it doesn't solve some business challenge, all you have is fun science experiment. And so we really feel like it's important to have those conversations together, because it really ratchets up the technology and the capabilities by having that dialogue go back and forth.
That's great. And so I think I had a look on your website the other day, and I think you can correct me on this, but have you got about 60 members now? Is that right?
Yes, about 60 members. We're about 4 years old, and just gaining members constantly, and it's a really exciting time.
So what's the mission and the main overarching purpose of the AMGTA then?
Sure. So really it's about understanding and promoting the environmental benefits of additive manufacturing, which we think are very robust. Really, our goal is to promote additive manufacturing because we see it as being a more sustainable method of production, distribution, inventory, supply chains, all of that. And so but part of that is understanding it, right? It's not enough to think it's more sustainable or to hope it's more sustainable. This has to be quantified. We have to put some numbers to it. And so really understanding that is what we're working towards. And we're doing that with our members with case studies and life cycle assessments and all of those kinds of things, because that's what the adopters of technology really need, right? They need to know, what is this going to do for my business? How is this going to impact? How's it going to change things? What do we need to do? And so we're trying to help provide some of that information.
So, Sherri, how does additive manufacturing contribute to sustainability then? What are some of its key environmental benefits compared to traditional manufacturing technologies?
Sure. So at its core, additive is a process of adding material to create a component layer by layer versus subtractive manufacturing, which is sort of the traditional method generally of machining away, cutting away material. And so that on its surface seems like it's going to be more sustainable, right? You don't have all this waste going on the shop floor that something has to be done with it. But additive provides so many more capabilities beyond that. There's geometries, components and parts that you simply couldn't make any other way because you can't cut, curved channels with a drill kind of setup. But there's also a whole host of environmental benefits beyond the production of the component itself. It's the ability to produce things in smaller quantities. That doesn't mean you need less of them, but you don't have to produce them all at once in one location, put them on inventory shelves, and hope they get consumed over some period of time.
Yeah.
The ability to produce things in parts, and because you can produce them in smaller quantities, you can now produce them in more locations instead of having to do it all in one place. So you can reduce distribution costs, you can reduce inventory carriage costs, not only the warehousing of it, but for the finance people, having capital tied up in stuff sitting on inventory shelves is painful.
Yeah.
And it also provides more resiliency, which over the last few years we've really become very keenly aware of resiliency and the kind of global shipping disruptions that can happen and those sort of things. So while additive quite often is more sustainable in the actual production of the part, there's really so much more that needs to be explored. And there's also things like, what is being able to get this part when you want it, where you want it, how you want it? What does that do for your business? Does it get a bigger piece of equipment up and running sooner if you need a spare part? If we think back during the pandemic, there were automobiles that couldn't come off the assembly line, or washing machines because they needed one part.
Yeah.
The ability to get that one part, even if it costs a little bit more to get that part manufactured right here, right now, but it enables you to get all of this stuff off the assembly line and out and into people's hands. Like, these are really big topics that need to be explored more, not just from a production standpoint, but from an overall business perspective. This is really, AM and its set of technologies are really poised to change a lot about how business is done around the world. I firmly believe that.
And I think that I know we spoke before the episode, Sherri, about, AM aside for a moment and just focusing on sustainability and how that's driving change in business. It's the same kind of business decisions that have always been made, right? Cost, as you've just pointed to.
Sure.
I think you said to me before this episode that cost and sustainability are two sides to the same coin. So,
right.
So it is about business optimizing and, as you say, AM is part of that future. So
absolutely.
With that in mind, what role do you see AM playing in the future of global manufacturing then, especially concerning environmental sustainability?
Right. the environment is a little bit different. I think most people would agree in Europe versus, let's say, the US. In terms of looking at sustainability. But really, for almost any business, when you say sustainability, they want to know how much is this going to cost. And as long as sustainability feels like taking your medicine, people aren't really interested, right? It's like money gets tight and they go, great, we don't have to do that anymore. But that's really taking the wrong view of sustainability. Sustainability and economic viability really are the same thing. Like you said, two sides of the same coin. If you're spending less money on energy, less money on materials, producing less waste that you have to pay to have something done with, and fewer parts that eventually end up in a waste bin because of overproduction. Those are great economic drivers, but those are all environmental drivers at the same time. These things are not at crossroads with each other. They really do track together. And so if you're running an efficient business and you're being effective or being resource efficient, you are probably running a more sustainable business. Now, if your driver for that was economic, you may not be capturing the sustainability part, right? It's sort of the fortunate unintended consequence of running an efficient and effective business. And so I look at it as like eating your carrots, right? Whether you're eating them because they're good for you or because you like them, it doesn't matter. Keep eating your carrots. And it's sort of the same thing here, whether you're making these decisions because it's good economically for your business or because it's good for the environment. Either way, keep doing it because eventually it ends up being better for the environment. And so that's really why we want to promote this.
Yeah, yeah. So what are some of the resources that manufacturers can use if they're starting to think about their sustainability journey and they want to start to explore AM? What are some of the resources that they can look to use?
Well, I would say quite often they're already doing things that are efficient and sustainable, but because it wasn't their primary objective, they're not capturing it. So if let's say the production team has to get these parts out and they've got to get this equipment up and running, that's what they're focused on, right?
Yeah.
They're not thinking about, hey, how am I using less energy or how am I, not creating as much waste? That may not be their focus because that's not how they're being measured. But if we reevaluate those exact same scenarios, I see stories in manufacturing all the time. They adopted a new process because it, saved money and saved shipping time and all those things. Go back and look at those exact same stories. If you have stories that you tell your customers now because they resonate, they understand them, they're good examples. Go back and look at that exact same story, but look at it with an eye to sustainability, get the sustainability folks involved and just reevaluate that exact same scenario. I think you're going to find you've got some great sustainability stories to talk about, but because it wasn't the primary objective, no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
But they're there and just need to be evaluated.
That's great.
So I would start there. That's the easiest place, right? You've already got these stories and probably already have a lot of the work done.
Yeah, yeah. And what resources do the AMGTA have as a starting point for manufacturers who are in the dark when it comes to AM? What are some of your resources that you can point to?
Sure. So on our website, we have use case examples, life cycle assessments that we've commissioned. We work with research institutions and our members to take these use cases and really dive in and get the numbers, see what this is really going to do. And like any new technology, there's areas where you spend more money and then you spend less money. You create more waste, you create less waste. And so it's not just about looking at one little portion of that process. You really need to look at the whole thing. Where's it better? Where's it worse? And how does it come out in the end? And so those are some great places to look at. But use cases are really great because they also tell a story, right? It's partly about the numbers, but it's partially about the story. Understanding how did this get used within a business? What were the impacts? What did the change look like within an organization, right? Change, most companies, are like, wow, change is going to be painful. But I would also say that, when people say that people or organizations don't like change, I would argue they don't like uncertainty, right? Nobody wants to jump off this cliff if they don't know what's down there. And The more we can provide context and numbers and confidence that if you go this path, here's what's going to happen, then businesses, if it's going to save them money, it's going to make more money, going to create less, it's going to be better, a better outcome, they're on board, but they want to know what it's going to do. So I think, we've already done some of those studies. Like I said, we're a young organization. I think we have maybe 5 or 6 on the shelf. At this moment, we're continuing to do more, but I think as a sector, we really need to do more of that.
Yeah, it's about knowledge exchange, isn't it? I was
Yeah.
speaking with someone this week, and we were talking about how the value of a report ends at the point where we stop translating the knowledge. So those use cases that you're talking about, that's actually about translating the knowledge, sharing that experience. As you say,
Yeah.
any change, any technology that's being brought into a company, there's always going to be hurdles and some resistance, but sharing case studies of how it's being done in other organizations opens the lid and gives, like you say, that full picture for
Right.
what it looks like in the real world
Right.
outside of the
Right.
report. Depending on who you're talking with, some people say that AM is not inherently sustainable. I'd like to know your thoughts on that and what you think distinguishes the AM companies who do take sustainability seriously.
Sure. So, I mean, I think like any technology being better, is really about how it's being used and how it's being measured. Right. I recently had someone tell me that one of the AM technologies, a very specific one, like laser powder bed fusion, they didn't know for printing metal. They weren't sure that it really had a future because the metal powder, is so expensive. And I thought, wow, he's really missing the story. That's like comparing a car to a horse by comparing the price of hay to gasoline. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a factor, but wow, you're really missing the benefits of this car if you're saying gasoline's more expensive than hay. Um, you really need to look at what are the benefits that this brings. And here's where I think quite often in these evaluations, we get it wrong. We use the traditional manufacturing as our measuring stick. And the only the only check boxes that we're evaluating are based on traditional manufacturing. And so you have this technology that's developed over really hundreds of years, decades, if not hundreds of years. And then we compare additive to it, but we're not comparing these extra benefits that additive brings, the geometries that it can bring. In traditional manufacturing, if you look at a system like a motor or something that's all these parts put together, the reason that it's all those parts put together is because you can't make all of that as one giant part. And then it has to be welded together or brazed together or bolted together. Well, with additive, you don't have to do that. You can just make it as one part. So all of those seams and joinings that leak, those are gone. But if you're just comparing a part to part based on the traditionally manufactured part, you don't even bring that into the equation. So even if, let's say manufacturing the part, you look at the cost, you look at the environmental impact, but are you also factoring in the durability, the fact that this part now lasts longer because it doesn't fail? Those things have to be brought into this conversation. And I think quite often a lot of the studies, even some of ours, if we were to go back and do them, I would do them differently. Because it doesn't factor in these amazing benefits that additive really can bring to a business, to production, to operations, to distribution. And so I think we need to look at it in that way, where what is additive bringing to this and how do we, sort of put a number to that? I was
Yeah.
talking to somebody about additive having the potential to reduce overproduction. So if you think about overproduction, you have to produce all these extra parts that eventually get thrown out or something, have to be disposed of. The savings, economic and environmental, may not be in the part you produce. It's in all the parts you didn't produce.
Yeah.
And I had an engineer, right? Because I'm talking to production people. And he said, I don't know how you put a value on a part I don't produce. I just smiled. I said, I'm pretty sure your finance people could put a
Yeah.
value on a part you don't produce, and your
Yeah.
sustainability people. But from a production perspective, that was not even part of their thought process, really. That's they just needed parts. And
Yeah.
so I think it's a much bigger business case than simply looking at the production. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
some really great examples out there.
And it sounds like what you're saying, or part of what you're saying, is that we can't look at anything in isolation, that actually we have to look at the
Absolutely.
big picture. We have to get the data and we have to look at everything in order to make informed decisions.
Absolutely. Because for anyone to adopt new technology, they don't want to know just this little tiny window. They want to know the big picture. How is this going to impact my business overall and the bottom line, right? What's going to
Yeah.
drop down to the bottom line? And that means, how does it impact all the areas of my business, and where are all the potentials where we should be leveraging this to get the best benefit? So, fortunately, there are players within the AM space that this is their role, is coming into a business, not only finding out what can you additively manufacture, but what does it make sense to do? What makes sense to do in-house versus outsourcing? You can outsource it and still get all the benefits of additive. You don't have to, bring this in-house immediately and try to build up, you can outsource it while you build up your technological capabilities in-house. But fortunately, there are organizations, consultants, and other organizations that can help businesses sort of see, where does it make sense to bring this into their business? Where can they get the biggest bang for the buck? And that's what people running businesses are looking for, right?
Yeah.
They're all for new technology if it'll deliver something for them. They just want to know how to integrate it properly.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. It goes back to that two sides to the same coin thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Sherri, we've reached the end of our conversation. So thanks for taking the time out. I know it's very early there in Florida, so I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time out to come and have this conversation. This has been 20 Minute Talks.
Thanks, Gemma.